Good morning. Happy Mother's Day. I express my gratitude not only to all mothers in the world who have given us life, nurtured us, and taught us, but especially to my own mother who resides in Korea. I'm unsure how to repay the boundless love and dedication my mother has given me throughout her life. Today, I want to talk to you about how we can transform feelings of resentment into gratitude and adversity into grace. As I prepared this talk, I found myself thinking a lot about my mother. A few years ago, when I was involved as a mentor in a youth mentoring program, I interviewed my father about his personal history. It was a program designed to teach mentees that even if their parents seemed irrational or flawed, there was a history that led them to be that way. And I wanted to lead by example by conducting interview myself. But then suddenly he burst into tears, saying, "Do you know how grateful your mother is for giving birth to you and bringing you into this world?" Actually, my mother couldn't even hold me right after I was born. She didn't get to see me until a week later. She was in critical condition while giving birth to me. She arrived at the hospital unconscious, and even though her life was in danger, she didn't give up on me and brought me into this world against all odds. It's because of her unwavering determination and sacrifice that I am able to be here today with you. So from a young age, I always felt deeply grateful for my mother's love, and I have lived diligently to repay her grace. However, when I went to university, my mind started to be drawn to luxurious clothes, good food, and fancy travel destinations. And I became fixated on the wounds inflicted by mother, becoming disappointed in her, and often forgetting her love and grace that I once vividly felt. Though the roots were planted, my heart withered away like a plant whose leaves have all dried up. Once, we had felt like one entity, and we could feel each other's emotional states, even when physically apart. But from that time onward, it felt like we had become two separate beings, and I even felt like an orphan. My teacher always emphasized the importance of repaying the grace of parents, saying that we often live resenting and fixating on one mistake our parents made and forget the countless kindness they bestowed upon us. Inspired by this teaching, I resolved to deeply feel once again the immense grace of my parents who wanted to do anything for my sake and earnestly practice gratitude. It was then that I encountered this Dharma discourse of Cardinal Master Chwasan. The Dharma discourse, titled Reflecting on the 9 Principles of Gratitude, is structured around 9 items for daily self-reflection. Shall we read each item together? Have you thoroughly reflected upon appreciate entirely into acts of repaying grace, feeling as if the fourfold grace flows through you like blood vessels? 3. In the face of myriad adversities that may afflict and threaten your life, can you remain serene, free from even the slightest hint of resentment, and steadfastly maintain the attitude of gratitude? Can you dissolve, without any lingering regret, the accumulated enmity from countless past lives, transmuting it into grace? 5. Do you possess the tolerance for forgive 100 wrongs repeatedly and transmute them into grace? 6. Do you have the resolve to ensure that this grace remains unchanging throughout countless eons? 7. Can you utilize and transmute all favorable and adverse sensory conditions, as well as the intertwined karmic connections of virtue and vice, into grace? 8. Can you transform and bestow grace upon all beings in the 6 realms of existence without exception, and convert every interaction among all sentient beings into mutual acts of grace without mutual harm? Can you discover, develop, and fully utilize infinite grace within the myriad things and phenomena of the universe and the Dharma realm of empty space, leaving nothing untouched and exploring all possibilities for application? Requiring the fourfold grace is the path that enables us to connect with all things in the universe through more energy. It is a path that transforms all things in the universe into grace, into virtuous connections, and into fields of blessings. Wow, that is so profound, isn't it? So, how many of these items do you think you can actually put into practice? 1, raise your hand. 1. 2. 3. 3 or more. Oh, oh my God, Olga, would you come up here? I think you might have give a Dharma talk in my place. Honestly, I haven't been able to practice all of these by myself. I had to really commit and make an effort to practice for this talk. After learning this Dharma discourse, I wasn't confident about practicing all of this. Each day feels like a struggle for me, and I often find myself disappointed in my inability to cope with adverse sensory conditions. But then to think about number 4, resolving accumulated enmity from countless past lives without any lingering regrets and transmuting it into grace. It's quite daunting. So while I had settled on a topic, preparing the talk, it was initially quite a struggle. However, I began to introspect and listen to the voices within me, deep within me. I took the time to carefully reread the discourse. Initially, I heard a voice saying, "This is impossible for me." But as I listened more closely, I found a deeper voice saying, "In fact, I want to live according to this Dharma discourse. I want to dissolve all the deep-seated enmity that torments me and turn it into grace." With this realization, I made a small effort to incorporate the teachings of my teachers into my daily life in hopes of bringing about changes described in the Dharma discourse. Do any of you also harbor deep-seated resentments or grudges that you'd rather not acknowledge? If so, let's study this discourse today and compare it with our own lives. Item 7, can we transform and utilize all sensory conditions, both favorable and adverse, along with the intertwined karmic connections of virtue and vice into grace? How can we turn those who bring harm or difficult sensory conditions into sources of grace? And how can we make use of that grace? This concept is grounded in the understanding that in the universe, nothing is inherently all good or all bad. Rather, there is coexistence of fortune and misfortune, grace and adversity. In the same vein, in the universe, yin and yang coexist, where winter, with its strongest yin energy, is exceedingly cold, yet within it lies a seed of yang, gradually warming and bringing forth spring. Similarly, summer with its strongest yang energy is excessively hot, yet within it lies the seed of yin, gradually cooling and ushering in winter. Even when faced with situations that cause harm, if we can discover within them the presence of grace and opportunity, we can turn those circumstances into beneficial experiences. Therefore, even Cardinal Master Taizan said, when someone troubles or harms me, instead of seeing them as an enemy, consider them as providing an opportunity for personal growth and learning, and cultivate great gratitude for the grace they offer. So how can we effectively incorporate the teachings provided by sensory conditions into our lives for our benefit? Today, I'd like to share 2 methods that I have been practicing with y'all. The first method is to turn enemies into grace. This is something the founding master Sotaesan himself spoke of. How can we turn enemies into grace, into benefactors? It becomes possible when we learn to use our own mind wisely. Let me share my story. My father passed away a few years ago, and I have 3 aunts. My father had 3 sisters. Since I was young, my aunts showed me love, but somewhere they seemed cool or distant. Then right after my father's passing, they completely changed. It felt as if they were keeping my siblings away from my grandmother and were trying to take over our family house where we had lived for over 30 years without our knowledge. When I confronted this situation, I was initially shocked to the core. I couldn't sleep thinking to myself, like, how could family do such a thing? And the thoughts lingered even during my morning meditation. But when I shared this with my teacher, he said, never hold resentment. At that very moment, when shock could have easily led to resentment, hearing those words strangely stopped my mind from flowing into resentment and instead brought it to the completely halt. So miraculously, a new sensory condition appeared. That is, a new horizon that opened up before the eyes of my mind. It was as if I could not see the principle of cause and effect. Our grandmother favored only our father since my aunts were young, as it was a quite patriarchal culture in Korea, and she often took care of our family more than hers. So resentment towards my father had been brewing in my aunt's heart, and eventually upon his passing, they aimed to harm our family. Feeling the depth of their hearts, I fully realized how difficult it must have been for them. Memories flooded back, like our eldest aunt working hard to save money for my dormitory fees when I entered university, or the images of my youngest aunt lovingly holding me in my baby photos. Seeing through their resentment, only gratitude remained in my heart, prompting me to write a letter to them expressing my feelings. Aunties, I've been through so and so and felt so and so. I love you and appreciate you. I can only imagine how tough it must have been for you all this time. I'll practice to support you when in need. The essence here is that by pausing the mind and restoring the sound thought, correct judgment emerges. Had I succumbed to boiling emotions without heeding my teacher's words, I would have likely suffered mentally or found myself overwhelmed with anger and resentment. The second method involves practicing not harboring resentment by contrasting it with the teachings and practice of mind of our teacher. This practice is akin to a car coming to a full stop when it sees a red light. When faced with something to resent, it means pausing before allowing resentment to arise. It's about being prepared to die to any circumstances that could trigger resentment so that the mind remains unmoved and unswayed. If we don't stop like this at the outset, resentment grows like a snowball, gradually reaching a point where we can no longer control it. Once we harbor resentment, it summons all past grievance from actions of others taken the previous day, a week ago, to even a year ago. That's why I believe it's most important not to harbor resentment from the start. Someone might ask me, is it possible not to harbor resentment? From my experience, I believe it is possible. When my mind and body becomes weary for any reason, irritation rises up to my throat. Executing the act of not harboring resentment is indeed very challenging, requiring significant effort, but trying it out, even at the risk of my life, surprisingly works. And as I pondered why I was feeling so irritable, I realized that deep within, there was always a strand of desires for my own sake. That was intricately woven. As an ordained devotee, one Buddhist minister, the essence lies in sacrificing oneself to save the world and all beings. Yet I found myself doing the exact opposite. When resentment surged like flames, I felt like I could only survive by venting it out. It was precisely at those moments that I discovered, through the teachings and practices of my teachers, that overcoming that hurdle felt like a weight being lifted off my chest. So I sincerely urge you all to join me in overcoming just once those unbearable moments when resentment arises. Reflecting on the teaching, In the face of myriad adversities that may afflict and threaten your life, can you remain serene, free from even the slightest hint of resentment, and steadfastly maintain the attitude of gratitude? When engaging in this practice, it's important to note that it's not about simply suppressing anger at all costs. Suppressing emotions forcefully is like pressing down on grass with a rock. It may explode eventually, and the grace will spring back to life. That effort alone has the power to completely transform the destiny of our mind. However, I am well aware that reaching the state that aligns with the 9 principles I mentioned earlier is still a long way off. Nevertheless, I also know that if I resolve to strive for it with all my being, I can surely attain it. Founding Master Sotaesan diagnosed this world as afflicted with the disease of resentment. He stated that whether they are siblings, spouses, parents, children, relatives, or friends, as well as groups, communities, and nations, tend to resent one another, focusing only on the faults of others rather than recognizing their own. He warned that if this disease is left unchecked, the world will inevitably face an unrecoverable crisis. Through reaching in every possible way, pondering and deliberating extensively, Founding Master Sotaesan finally discovered a solid remedy, which is to transform enemies into grace. When enmity in our heart turns into grace, the environment around us transforms, leading to mutual prosperity in society, nation, and the world. I contemplate these teachings, and I hope you will take this discourse and read it daily, and also you contemplate these teachings very carefully. I believe you will experience the gradual melting away of resentments that torment your heart, which seem unsolvable even unto death. I too will continue to cultivate grace without giving up until the end. Thank you for listening.